Breaking news. If there are unresolved issues with Russia, Lukashenko plans to visit Putin to discuss them. They last saw each other at the May 9 victory parade in Red Square. The dictator of Belarus had to rush back to his homeland, perhaps for a Highlands, after a trip abroad. 6 days later he spoke again, but with a weak voice and an appearance that has also triggered doubts about his real presence, and the rumors about his health have only grown since then. On the other hand, Alexander Lukashenko has announced that he will be in Moscow on Wednesday to meet with Vladimir Putin. The meeting was a summit, he said, with Lukashenko receiving Belarus's ambassador to Russia, Dmitry Krutoy. The envoy of Beijing had just finished the first stage, a Kiev mission that would also lead him to Russia when, on May 18, Minsk once again proposed itself as a venue for talks for a solution to the crisis in Ukraine. To find a way out of this crisis, Poland, France, and Germany need to work together. Secretary of the Security Council Alexander Volfovich said, Minsk is ready to host discussions on all weight problematic. Today, ending the war in Ukraine is Europe's top priority. We will negotiate a peaceful resolution to this bloodbath that no one seeks. There are additional topics that we will cover. But at the very least, he continued, this is where we need to begin. In early 2022, shortly after the invasion began, Lukashenko claims that Russia was ready to sign an agreement to resolve the conflict with the Ukraine during negotiations in Belarus and then into Turkey. According to Belta's reporting, he continued by saying that Russian lawmakers had been directly involved in the process from the start. We have made a proposal for talks. To talk about how to end the war. We held 3 meetings to discuss the issue. Zelensky then proposed rescheduling the talks in Turkey. Sure, no sweat. Turkey is that. They presented a proposed agreement outline. Russia would go insane if he read it now. He was completely unfavorable for Moscow, but eventually she agreed to sign. On my desk, I have the book. Russia accepted the agreement only to promptly discard it, with or without public knowledge. Experts on American national security write the following in a letter published by the Eisenhower MediaNet. Given the grave dangers of military escalation that could spiral out of control, we as Americans and experts on national security urge President Biden and Congress to use their full power to end the Russia-Ukraine war swiftly through diplomacy. President John F. Kennedy made a point 60 years ago that is critical to our continued existence. While protecting our vital interests, it is imperative that nuclear powers avoid confrontations that force their opponents to choose between a humiliating retreat and nuclear war. Taking such a path in the nuclear era would prove nothing more than the failure of our policy or a desire to see the world destroyed. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine is the direct cause of this catastrophe. Russian anxiety was stoked by plans and actions to expand NATO to the country's borders. This was a point that Russian leaders stressed for 30 years. Due to diplomatic failure, war broke out. Now, more than ever, diplomacy must be used to put an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict before it destroys Ukraine and threatens the safety of humanity. Russia's current geopolitical anxiety can be traced back to the country's history of invasions by people like Charles XII, Napoleon, the Kaiser, and Hitler. After World War I, Russia experienced a civil war, and the United States sent troops to intervene on the side that ultimately won. The United States and NATO view NATO expansion and presence on Russia's borders as prudent preparedness, while Russia sees a direct threat. Diplomacy requires a level of strategic empathy, wherein the negotiator makes an effort to put themselves in the shoes of their opponents. The opposite of weakness is wisdom. We do not see President Biden's pledge to stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes, as anything other than a green light to pursue vague and ultimately unachievable objectives. Fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian is a strategy we cannot and will not support. We urge a serious and honest willingness to engage in diplomatic efforts, including an immediate ceasefire and negotiations without preconditions. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine was sparked by deliberate provocation. Just as diplomatic effort can put an end to it, so can military force.